Welcome, everybody. I'm Mike McGowan, and this is Avoiding the Addiction Affliction, brought to you by Westwards Consulting, the Kenosha County Substance Use Disorder Coalition, and by a grant from the state of Wisconsin's Dose of Reality Real Talks, reminding you that opioids are powerful drugs and that one pill can kill. A few weeks ago, we had a conversation with our guest today, Jeanne Foot, about holistic recovery. As often happens, Jeanne and I were talking afterwards, and Jeanne said, closing the gap between knowing and doing would make for an interesting topic. I agree. That's what we're going to talk about today. As a reminder, Jeanne is the founder and CEO of the Recovery Concierge, a premier service for mental health, addiction recovery, trauma healing, and peak performance. In addition to her own lived experience, she also holds credentials as an international certified alcohol and drug counselor. She's trained in hypnotherapy, neuro-linguistic programming, and somatic work. Using evidence-based therapeutic methods, she works with her clients to create a recovery path that works for their lifestyle. Jeanne is also the host of an absolutely terrific podcast called Naturally High. As always, we'll put a link to all of her connections on our blurb. Welcome back, Jeanne.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well,
Always good to chat with you, Mike.
yeah, I like talking to everybody, but some people I just like talking to more than others, and you're one of them. Let's
Oh,
start
thank
with the
you.
obvious since I said that in the beginning. What do you mean when you say there's a difference between knowing and doing?
Everybody has a want, a wish, a desire, a goal, and people know what they need to be doing. So none of us are short on information anymore. What we're short on is implementation. How do we get from knowing what we need to do, whether it's stop eating the chocolate cake or getting to the gym or more serious situations like leaving a relationship or drug addiction or whatever we're talking about, to actually implementing it and doing? That is where we're going to find real transformational change. But people don't know how to do that.
No, they don't, do they? Even your first sentence was, we all know. Sometimes not, right?
I think so. When I say knowing doing that, I think even if we sit quiet enough with ourselves for just a moment, I think we do know. But
Yes.
you're right. There's are people who don't want to know and keep themselves in absolute denial. Because the truth is, if we actually even consider something that we know we need to change, whether it's benign like losing weight or it's more serious like drug addiction, we actually then have a responsibility to take action on it, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's easier not to know. But I think many times people really aren't short on the information, whether it's going to the gym, eliminating, starting to confide to someone, going to a therapist, or going to a 12-step meeting, or whatever it may be for someone. It doesn't really matter. They need to take that first step, and that responsibility lies with them, no one else.
So why do
But then
people
it
stay
comes,
stuck then?
why do people stay stuck? I think there's layers. I think there's complexity. So I do believe trauma comes into play. So I think people who have had less adverse experiences in life, we know that the more adverse experience a child has, adverse childhood experiences, the more traumatic and chaotic their life will be. And that can be like the, I don't know what the actual word is. It's the inciting factor almost for illness and other issues later on in life. So I think people who have, everybody knows, I think that's what our Earth curriculum is all about. We come to this planet, we're given the family we need. It may not be the family that we want, but we get for our maximum growth and development. Some of us are more fortunate than others, there's no question. And some of us have more pain than others. That's also true. But at the end of the day, there's no rhyme or reason why some people really come to the table and others don't. I do believe that people who struggle making that change, it can be an egoic defense for something less complex, or it could be some severe trauma that still needs processing in a very different way than it has been given space to do so before. So this is it, there really isn't that rhyme or reason, but I think most people fail because there's a design problem. They're not set up to succeed. They think they're going to go on willpower. I really want to do this. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get out of that relationship. I'm going to go to the gym. And on a good day, that's super easy. It's easy. It's like going for a walk. But on a hard day, it becomes very heavy. And it's heavy lifting to get those weights up when you feel like, oh my goodness, like everything is stacked against you, or your mood is low, or you got more pressures coming at you. And so people rely on how they feel to take the next step. And that is a disastrous way of operating. If we rely on what we know we have to do, so what is the smallest action I can do today to get the result I need? So let's use the gym, for example. So if I know that I really want to change and become more active compared to sedentary, I don't have to walk 5 to 10,000 steps a day. Great if you can, but it may not be that big goal for someone. But what is the literally the smallest thing I can do to keep me in the game? Because if I can keep in the game today, I'm more than likely going to actually do the next step tomorrow. So we
Hmm.
call that a floor. So there's a floor and a ceiling. So a floor is what is the minimal I can do? It may be doing some push-ups in between clients. It may be going for a walk into getting 3,000 steps and not 5 or 10, whatever it may be, so that the next day when they have more time, they can actually go for that proper workout or they can go for their actual goal that they set for themselves.
Do you think people stop themselves because of that? That they think if I can't do 10,000 steps a day and those dumb Fitbits that monitor it and set up for some a lot of people unrealistic goal. How many times, Gene, have you talked to somebody and they want to tell you how many steps they did that day or they're checking?
Absolutely.
And if they can't do 10,000, I won't do any.
So I was one of those people because I had a perfectionistic attitude that it's either go big or go home kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? It's either all or nothing, right? And I didn't realize that there's nothing wrong. My chances of setting myself up for success to do something when I've missed a day's workout, for example, the next day my likelihood of going is going to plummet by 40%. And then the next day I think it's down to zero. So
Yeah.
to have your foot in the door and doing something, no matter how small it is increasing your likelihood for the next day, which is why it's a design problem. Most people believe if you can't get it right, then what's about, like, why bother? There's still so much value in doing something rather than nothing.
I'm somewhat the same way. And it took me a long time to go, if I
Mm.
can't bike the entire hour and a half today, then I won't
Mm.
do it at all, to convince myself that an hour of biking, which is huge, right, is so much better than nothing. But for a long time, it was an hour and a half or zero. And then I was like, this is just dumb.
It feels insane when you come to that realization, like you have to do a certain way, you're vested in how it looks,
Yeah.
rather than what the process is being in the game and doing something active.
Do
Because
you also
that's going to be the juice to get you to the next step.
do you also think that some people's lives are so full of chaos that they don't
Mhm.
even know that first little step that they can take? Everything is so overwhelming. So how do you get, if you do, how do you get somebody to slow down to take a first little step?
I always say you're the common denominator in your own life. So you have to look at what is going on around you. So if there's chaos following you everywhere, some of it, and I've had a fair share of chaos, which has been more circumstantial than me. But then at the same time, so then what is the part that I can change? And the part that I can change is maybe how I engage or not engage with someone, even when you feel like it's not your fault. So how do you get the person to slow down? I think you have to recognize that we do better with mentors or guides or teachers or fellow journeymen. We can't do this always by ourselves. We
Mm-mm,
have to
mm-mm.
find one safe person, whether it's a friend, whether it's a coach, a therapist, whoever that person is for us. It could even be a family member. But we need one safe person who can really co-regulate. That's what we're designed to do, is co-regulate. That's what babies do. That's why babies can't regulate on their own. They need a family, they need a caregiver to regulate when they're young until they can do that by themselves. And so for children who've had a very chaotic life, they just become chaotic adults. They have no chance, really, if you think about it. So we have to find safety, because only when we find safety in a container of unconditional love, unconditional, no judgment at all, no shaming, that we can feel safe enough to relax, that maybe then we can access parts of ourselves that we haven't been able to before. So I think that's a big part of it.
Okay, let's come at it from the support, and I'm your friend. We'll do the therapist end of it in a little while, but I'm your friend, and we all have friends, Jeanne, who complain to us about the same issue over and over again, and then we try to support. Sometimes we give advice if it's solicited, right? And then they don't take it, and it's incredibly frustrating. So, as a friend, what can I say to at least get them to recognize they're choosing to stay in that pattern or stuck?
So I'm familiar with this because I have some good friends there's always one person who confides in you, right? You're probably that person with all the people in your life, right? I'm sure everybody comes to you with the same thing and say, hey, what's up? So when it's repetitive, it's the exactly same problem. It could be a partner issue, right? Like a boyfriend, girlfriend, or partner that's really ill-fitted or the same problem over and over again. That's what I deal with someone close to me. And it's like we're having the same conversations 100 times over and over again. So this person knows, but just says, I need a moment to vent. So venting is reasonable at first.
Hmm.
Sometimes we need to vent. We need to get it off our chest. We need to. But when it's in a perpetual cycle of venting and with no action, it's actually detrimental to that person. It then becomes an addiction almost because they're
Yes.
addicted to the cycle of keeping it alive and what if. And really, what you're keeping alive is the indecision of not moving forward on anything. Because if I have to really reconcile with the problem I have in front of me, I may have to take action. And I don't want to do that because that may be very final or very uncomfortable or whatever it may be for the person, right? So I think we have to recognize what is playing in here. But I think asking better questions is a good one. And like, how does this serve you? We talk about this a lot, but I
Mm.
see that you're not really moving forward on anything. How does this really serve you? You have the information you know. Now, what are you going to do about it? Whatever it may be on the situation, depending on what we're talking about. So I think it's really about asking open-ended questions and throwing it back to them that they have to be the expert in their own lives, which they truly are. They know. It's not for us to tell someone what they need or should do. There's that temptation for sure, but it really, the agency belongs with them.
Yeah. What I really want to know is how can I help you take the next step forward? Because this is getting exhausting as your friend. And many of us, as a friend, start oh, it's him again. And we don't even
And
answer,
not just
right?
exhausted, but it's not serving either.
No, no, it spirals you down. It exhausts you, right? But maybe it's the same thing, but we have a lot of counselors who listen to this podcast, as I'm sure you do yours, right? So as a therapist or a counselor, it's our job to listen, right? Some approaches are more direct than others. Mine has become more direct as I get older, right? What's a therapeutic response you give to someone when in a therapeutic session? And now I know I'm going to have people listening to this say, no, your job is to listen, you don't give up. I'm not on that school, right? So somebody who's going around in circles, what's a therapeutic response in a session that you can get them to move forward?
I think you, like you just said, I think you said it beautifully. We've been talking about this for many times or a lot of times, and we're talking about the exact same dynamic that seems to play out in your life. How is this serving you? What would you like to do next? I think really making them, putting the agency back onto them, like not giving them any information of what your insight, that's not serving a therapist. Telling them what they think is going on is not serving them. It may be tempting to want to do that because you can see the problem so clearly, but the agency belongs with the client always. If the client is saying to you, hey, I'm really not sure, then you help them unpack it and tease it apart a little bit so that they can be discerning about what the next step is and make the decision. But I think too often there is a temptation to presuppose that we know what's going on for a client. And even though there's elements that could be true, there's also elements that are not true. We don't know the
Mhm.
client's complete history. We don't know the client's talk therapy. If you're having someone who's talking about their issues and their severe trauma, it's only going to exacerbate it. It's not going to be the solution for them. So maybe slowing them down, making them feel like they are in a safe container with someone where they can really truly express themselves, maybe the first step. And we need to titrate that too, because sometimes we want to go big or go home, put our foot right in the water. Maybe it's just putting our little baby toe in the water and getting comfortable with just some space without filling the room with air or talking. Maybe it's having one tear and just sitting with that for a moment. So there's a realization that follows it. But we need to titrate people because if people go too quick, too big, and too quickly, they're going to run and they won't come back.
And say therapy doesn't work, and that can create a long time before they seek help again, right?
Absolutely.
I had a theory that I was used to talk about. I call it the bubble up, that people deal with things that they're strong enough to deal with. And I think it's unconscious somewhat. If I can't deal with this issue, I just won't come up. And when we're stronger, it just bubbles up, right? I don't know if you subscribe to that, but I think the stronger somebody is, the more likely they are going to go deeper into the water.
Ideally, yes, but they have to have a sense of self. I think there's this belief that life is supposed to be easy. And somehow people have bought into that. I don't know why.
Yeah. Where's
But I
that
think that's
population?
where all the problems lie, right? Life
Yeah.
is hard. It is hard for people. Yes, we can be blessed in many ways, and it can be beautiful and it can be sad at the same time. There's duality in life. But somehow we think it's either good or it's bad. And we come from this black and white camp where it can be both. We can hold space for beauty and heartache, right? And so I think if we buy into the belief that life is supposed to be easy, I think it becomes really painful and hard. That is part of it. And then when we welcome the pain and befriend it, is what transmutes it. Is when we resist, it persists. And it's so true. Just, you know, that it's just physics. Try to push a ball underwater, it's going to come right up. It's the same thing with the problems in our life and issues in our life. So I do think that if we could just welcome it a little easier, knowing that it is really for our best evolution of self and for growth, and everything that we want, each and every one of us is on the other side of that hard, painful work. And so it's bring it on. That's what Phil Stutz talks about, the reversal of desire. Don't run away from it, just bring it on. That's what's going to get you through to the other side.
I talk to a lot of therapists. I'm sure you do too. And oftentimes when we talk about stuff like this, the conversation ends up being how frustrated they are with their clients staying stuck. So, a question for you is, how do you cope with the frustration that comes from not getting more movement?
I think you have to be brutally honest with your clients and put boundaries in place. So when I was earlier on in my career, I wanted to help so many people. I would try harder than my clients sometimes.
Yeah.
And I always used to say that I'm not going to work harder at your recovery than I said I want to work harder at your recovery, but I was the one who was working harder than them. So I think putting boundaries, really good structure in place before you take on a client so that you can have these difficult conversations if you get into a coaching relationship with someone or a counseling relationship with someone and suddenly it takes a real turn that you can see they're resistant or they're not there or they're vacant or they're checked out or they're whatever they fill in the blank the way you want. Then you're set and primed to have a difficult conversation. I noticed that you've been away a little bit more. In order to work with me, we need to have a commitment of at least X amount of sessions. I notice you're canceling appointments, whatever it may be, but I think you're primed then to have a very different conversation with the client. Where if you just keep, a lot of people think that I pay, I say, right? So because they pay you for your professional services, they can just run the show. That's doing a client a disservice. Absolutely. There has to be some containment around structure, boundaries, what is okay, what is not okay, to form the container so that you can have this healthy, safe relationship moving forward. And then if it is a bumpy road, then we can talk about it.
Okay, that's an interesting concept. And it's, I pay the auto mechanic, but I don't think I'm in charge, right? because my assumption is the auto mechanic knows more. Same thing with my doctor. There's a whole bunch of things that I pay for that I don't think that I know the most of. But when it comes to these things, feelings, emotions, life, why is it that we listen to what we think we know and all of those really knowledgeable people around us, like the lady at the grocery store and our hairstylist and our cousin and our sister, rather than the person who does this for a living?
I say is a kind of something that I've seen in family systems.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. As long as a parent is paying, they get to say, they don't really, but that was the attitude a lot of us grew up with. Okay. So this is where it comes from. And I think it's relationship based. So if I'm in a personal relationship with you, as in, and I know it's a professional relationship, but in a counseling coaching container, it's a personal relationship regardless. It's an intimate relationship because there's vulnerability and some disclosure around it. It becomes personal. And so I think there is that attitude that can leak into it
Mm.
sometimes. I've seen it with, I hate to say it, but I've seen it with clients who have really high net worth. They tend, some, not all, some tend to really throw it around. That's their currency. They're used to getting their own way because they
Hmm.
feel they can pay their way through. Is it like that for everybody? No. But I think in personal relationships, you're going to have more of an element of that.
I think when we meet with somebody, even one on one, there's a lot of people in the room, right? Acquaintances of theirs, people who have said things, and you don't know what that is. You don't know what their sister has said to them about therapy or their issues. How do you deal with the other people that are always in the room with somebody? How do you get them to talk about it, to acknowledge it, to compartmentalize it? Or what do you do when you perceive that there's other people in the room?
Usually, what you'll see is certain phrases will be said repetitively, right? And so then it would be interesting to ask somebody, say, that's interesting. Tell me, when was the first time you believed that? Where did is that belief belong to you or someone else, right? So really distilling down where maybe that belief came from or that strong opinion or aversion from something, depending on what we're talking about, they will feel not integrated. They would feel like they almost belong to someone else. So you check it. Say that, ask them exactly. Say, when was the first time you believed that? When was the first time that happened to you? Tell me more. And get them becoming, because they may not even realize it. They probably don't realize it. It's an unconscious belief or subconscious belief rather than conscious choice. So if we can close that gap, the pause between the thought and the action, then there's awareness in between. And with awareness, we can possibly change or see or believe something different. So I think that's an important part is who's speaking here.
I had an eighth
And
grade
most of
teacher.
our beliefs are adopted. They're adapted and adopted.
One time, Jeanne, I had an eighth grade teacher call me up to the front of her room and said, "Why are you getting a D in my English class?" And I said, "Because I'm dumb as a doorknob." And she said, "That's an interesting phrase for a 13-year-old boy to use." And it washed over me. And it was not my phrase, it was what I'd heard, right? And then she quickly corrected that. She said, "You're not dumb. You're really bright." And it was just one person giving me a positive to turn that part of it around. But it's interesting how many messages are unconscious that we carry forward, right?
That's a beautiful example. And what a special teacher, because she knew that there was something more underneath how you're behaving, what was being reflected.
Yeah,
And
except I
she
had to
got to
work harder
that.
in her English class. And
Oh, wow. That sure paid off for you, didn't it?
it did. It did. Mrs. Andrews, thank you very much. What, okay, so change, but this is what we're talking about, the knowing and the doing. The doing is hard because change isn't always going to immediately be changed for the better. And we have all heard it that sometimes the unknown, even though it may be more functional, is scarier than the dysfunctional known.
That's why people stay in poor relationships,
Yeah.
right? Because it's better than something than nothing. So I understand that. I think probably one of the misnomers around change is that you've got to bite everything off in one gulp, right? It's got to be the whole thing, the whole approach. And change, like anything, can have its own imperfections around it. It doesn't have to always be perfect. It's a matter of being consistent because we now know that consistent small actions are more powerful than the big ones. And people still think that is it has to be perfect, otherwise I'm not going to work out. And those they still feel that it's the big levers that really make the difference. It's not. It's the small, consistent daily habits that make change reasonably. And so if we can start to recognize that it's not a perfect process how we approach it, and there will be better days than not, and there's going to be harder days as well, that it's all part of the process. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to be in the game in order for change to happen. And most of us take ourselves out of the game before we even start. Can't do it this way, so I'm not going to do it at all.
That fear.
Absolutely. This also could be ego, which is really, it can be parts and shadows of ourselves that haven't really been healed and haven't been integrated back into ourselves. I do believe that we can be really good in some aspects and still have weaknesses in other. And so those are the things that these are the teachable moments. How am I going to act in this moment? Am I going to take myself out and blow myself up and sabotage, or am I going to stay steady and just stay in the game, even though I'm not loving this? Because
Yeah,
I know tomorrow will be easier.
and like you say, even if you stay steady, it doesn't mean that the rise is consistent. There's dips and
There's peaks and
hills.
valleys. I think for people who struggle with physical components, your head will follow later. And somebody
Mm.
who has mental components, I think your body follows later. So it's, we're waiting to be integrated as a whole person healing, whatever that healing is from us, whether it's a physical component or it's an emotional component or mental component. It will take time before we integrate and we recalibrate on a higher frequency. And when we know more, we do more. It's really that simple. We're not always able to at certain spots. But it's every day you go to bed sober, or every day that you've hit the gym, the likelihood of you doing it tomorrow is that much greater. It's really that simple. So keep yourself in the game.
You talked about relationships. Do you think that who we are at any given moment is a function of who we attract?
I think so. I think so. I think sometimes relationships are spiritually given. So whether somebody believes in God or not, I happen to. I don't think we could say universal energy as a mystic component of why things happen. Sometimes events line up beyond what we could have ever imagined or designed. And sometimes I think energy is contagious. We all know that for better and for worse. You can walk into a room when you know an argument's taken place and you can feel the air is thick and you can feel it even though no one's talking, right? You know something just went down, but you don't know exactly what, but it doesn't matter. Or you can just turn the corner and be with a bunch of people who just immediately start, I call the word kibitzing. They start talking to you and they start joking with you about something and you banter and you're completely alive in that moment too. So absolutely.
I'm the same person in both of those moments, and people just don't like me in the first one because I'll walk into that silent room and start bantering and joking, and that's my
And
way
they
of
go,
coping with it, right? And they're like, "No, read the room." I'm like, "I did. I actually did read the room. No, I don't want to participate."
exactly. You have a choice, right?
Yeah,
Is there value in participating in that way, like bringing everybody down to a somber level, right? If we can hold ourselves in a higher, I would say, frequency, energetic frequency, which means it's a vibrational frequency that we're going to attract. Let's do that. It's
and
like
that,
hooking into a Wi-Fi setting, right? Like you want to attract the right frequency of your
yeah,
Wi-Fi, right? You could go on someone who's got a very low functioning Wi-Fi and speed, or you can go on someone who's got a really high turbo boost of Wi-Fi, right?
yeah. I'd like my life to be 5 bars just once in a while, right?
Oh, I'm sure it is, Mike.
Okay, so you just mentioned if it's not going well, how do you keep yourself, where's the boundary? Because we've all left conversations with friends, family, if we're therapists, sessions with therapists, where we bring it home. So where's the boundary? And so two things, how do you protect your own self and let go of the stresses that come to you just in your day-to-day relationships? And then how do you enrich yourself and get out of that negativity?
Okay. So a hard lesson for me because I'm really a peacemaker and I want to be liked by all. And I generally do like people. And so when you have difficult people in your life or who people who are projecting out or blaming out, it's really a lot more to do about them than
Mhm.
us, right? And for people who are sensitive, like myself, I would take it personally. But I have non-negotiables, and it took me a while to figure that out. Is what are my non-negotiables? How am I going to allow people to treat me? Okay. So when someone crosses a line in terms of personal respect or ethics, or however, or blaming or not taking responsibility, then that can be a deal breaker for me because now I'm out of integrity with myself. Almost becoming hostage by the person who's provoking, and I feel I'm not even myself anymore because I just put up with something I would normally never do. So I think that's an important component of it. It makes it easier. So your world will get smaller, unfortunately. That's the reality. And then I second guess myself, like, okay, did you do the right thing? But one of the things I've come up with, I love people from a distance. I have people in my life who I truly love, family members I'm estranged from. They're in my heart, but we don't have a relationship because it's not healthy to have a relationship. And I've come to terms with that. Do I think sometimes have I made the right decision? Yeah, sometimes I do, because it still pains me that it can't be easier, but I know it's healthier for me for it to be this way. So know your non-negotiables, I think is absolutely essential.
Boy, for those of you who are listening to this or watching it, back this up 2 minutes and re-listen to that because there's at least several hours of thought in there. Our world becomes smaller. I think that's okay. When you set healthy boundaries, your world may become smaller because there's some unhealthy people out there, right?
And
And
it becomes richer
yes,
because of it. It's
yeah,
not that small is such a bad thing. It does become smaller, but I feel like it's richer because there's a depth within yourself and the people that you are in relationship with who are meaningful to you that takes on something very different because of it.
Gene, I get it that people say, well, I kind of have to put up with this. It's my boss. And I'm like, that's something you got to work through too, right? But then if you carry that frustration, then they tend to take that out on somebody that they don't have to take it with, right? So all of a sudden their kids pay the price for that, or their colleagues pay the price for that, or their friends pay the price for their putting up with it from their boss. And also in a relationship, I have to put up with it. That's my boyfriend. Really? Would you put up with that with your friend? Would you put up with that with a teacher? Would you put up with that with a coach? You have to set your own boundaries, I would think.
I do. I agree with that. And it's interesting because in life, the few times I have been bullied and I've pushed back hard, this is before I actually had non-negotiables. I found that bullies really are just very insecure, scared people. That's why they do what they do. And the minute I push back, even though I'm terrified doing it, not that I'm so brave, it was an instinctive thing for me to push back. Their whole behavior and conduct changes. I actually told a client many years ago, take his business somewhere else because he
Mm,
was like harassing me and treating me like he owned me. And from that moment, 40 years later, we still have a good professional relationship. So sometimes I didn't know that was going to be the outcome of it. It just so happened it was. He has a whole much different level of respect for me because I did push back. And he
you,
probably learned something along the way.
what did the Beatles say? The last line they ever sang in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. So there you go. Gene, this is always great. I thought of about 9 other conversations we can have during this. So, folks, those of you who listen, expect that I'm going to ask her, and maybe she'll be generous to do this again with us. Um,
Oh, thank
Thanks
you.
for just another great conversation. For those of you listening, watching, I hope you find peace, contentment, support, but especially health and boundaries wherever you are. We thank you for listening, for watching. We want you to be well, be safe, and take the time to get to know you.